staying with the Marikana massacre a decade on. Joining us now is Numsa's Deputy General Secretary, Mbuso Ngubane. Mr. Ngubane, a very good evening to you. Welcome to not Daytime Update, but News at Prime. 10 years since the massacre, how would you say the events of Marikana and the massacre itself have reshaped organized labor in South Africa?
Let me greet you and your viewers, and firstly correct that I'm not the General Secretary, but I'm a Deputy General Secretary of Numsa. But also, firstly, we want to bow our heads in respect of those workers who lost their lives in the picketing line, which was very much peaceful. And as Numsa, you'll know that in actual fact, when the country was in a shock, it was Numsa that characterized that incident as a massacre, because we would have looked into what would have happened, and we've always called for a non-interference of police from time to time when there are labor disputes between the workers and the employers. And unfortunately, the ANC government will always unleash state security to actually harass and brutalize the workers in the picketing line as and when there are labor disputes, which is something that we think that we continue to contest and fight against as Numsa, and we continue to call on all the formations of the labor movement to fight against the brutality that is continuously being unleashed by police against our members. But we must say that, of course, that massacre, it's one of the biggest massacres, especially under the democratic government led by the ANC in this country. And we think that after 10 years, it is really disappointing that there's never been any effort or willingness to make sure that there's justice, particularly to console the widows and the families and the children of those who lost their lives. And we think that the government has got all capacity to meet those families halfway. We know that they will never be able to bring them back, but at least they should do what is correct to meet those families halfway and ensure that at least their conditions are actually looked after, or they are improved.
So government, of course, at this point is still seized with the compensation process for the families of the deceased, wounded and injured miners as well, right? So that's the government responsibility. Then you've got the criminal justice system, which needs to deal with whether anyone is actually ever prosecuted for the deaths of 44 people in total who died in Marikana during that period of the strike, 34 years on the 16th of August. But there were those 10 other people who were also killed. 10 years on, do you believe today that justice will ever be done here?
Look, this is a very clear indication that the lives of workers in this country is not being valued. I mean, there are a lot of crimes that are happening, and when they happen against the certain so-called prominent individuals, you'll see an immediate arrest. Here we're talking about something was clearly orchestrated, something that was clearly premeditated, something that was captured on videos, something where even the media was present, which we think that would make it easier for police to investigate and identify perpetrators. And up until to date, we don't see any arrest. And remember, these are the same workers, these are the same families who would have voted for the ANC into power repeatedly, and yet today they are being betrayed. And I think that it is really a very much worrying that we've got an ANC government that doesn't care for its own people. This government continues to be the government of capitalists who prefers to prioritize how do they bring about the conditions that are actually assisting the capitalists to make more profit at the expense of our own people. I mean, here, these workers were actually demanding a living wage, and a living wage out of the surplus value which they would have contributed to to actually build in those particular companies. Remember that the mining sector in this country is one of the key sectors of the economy, and you cannot continue having individuals who amass our mineral resources, and yet there's no beneficiations, the beneficiation for the country, and they also outsmart our own people by giving them peanut wages. And as and when there are negotiations, they don't take workers serious. They don't also consider that those surplus value workers, they must have shares. I mean, they must have share. Remember that these employers, they would have divided among themselves what they would call performance bonuses. The owners, the so-called owners of those mining companies, they would have also given themselves dividends. And who produce those dividends? Who produce those performance bonuses? It is these same workers who goes underground and sweat and ensure that they produce what is meant, what is set to them as target. And as and when they are saying we want our share, then security entities are unleashed against them. And again, we're saying as Numsa, this is a fight that all unions must fight against.
We're running out of time, sir, but I wanted to ask you about something from the Farlam Commission of Inquiry, which, after it had been listening to evidence from various people to do with events in Marikana in 2012, it found that the unions, AMCU and the NUM, had not been in full control of their members during that protracted wage strike. The NUM, the commission then said, continued to advise basically its workers, its members, to continue to report for duty, even though there was already the risk of death because there'd been so much violence in the days prior. Today, as Numsa, as a trade union, how much attention do you pay to making sure that, A, there isn't an escalation to violence as we saw in 2012, and that, B, when you do go on strike, workers are kept as safe as possible?
Look, we are raising this question at the right time because as Numsa as well, we are engaged on wage negotiations in different sectors, and there's a possibility that we might embark on mass action anytime soon. But I must say that what is important is that as different unions existing in those particular sectors, as and when there's a particular union which embarks on a strike, it is important that we unite and forget about the emblems and look into the actual demands and be able to say, let's join hands, because remember that capital will always be united against us. And for us to be divided is not doing any good for us, but our unity is the only weapon we have, because remember, we are not owning any means of production. But by the time we enter into those factories, by the time we enter into those workplaces, we are weak because we're not owning anything, but we are there to sell our labor in order to be able to put a bread on the table. And therefore, we continue to make sure that we address our members. We make sure that there are strike committees. We make sure that the leadership is always there. We make sure that the officials of the unions are there. But at the same time, we continue to be worried because it is not only in the mining sector, by the way. Whenever workers are in the picketing line, police are the first to arrive and provoke our members without any reason. And they don't even want to understand that this is a labor which is supposed to be respected and the space must be given, including the municipal bylaws, for that matter, are not really friendly towards the workers as and when they are confronted with intransigent employers, which compels them to go out and be able and join the picketing line.
Mbuso Ngubane, Numsa Deputy General Secretary, a pleasure to have your time tonight, sir. Thank you.